point. So I'm going to go all the way to this side. I have a mock train here set up so I can just show you how this works. I didn't attach a locomotive to it because I haven't cleaned the tracks yet and I just didn't want to deal with it. So I'm just going to push them by hand. But as you can see here, here are my sensors. There's one here and there's one there. Now, right now they're not completely covered, but I have covered them. Even with the bush over the sensor, it still throws the light far enough where, you know, like if I put this in front of the light, it'll still shoot it through. So I can hide them very easily. And that's what I plan on doing here, just kind of putting, you know, shrubs and things and trees so it kind of blends in. This is the entrance point or the exit point if you're going in the opposite direction. But right now we're going to enter the zone so that we can head in this direction. With that said, the entrance or the initial sensors have a 30-second, I think it's 30-second timer on it. So as soon as you trigger it, there's a clock that goes off in the board, and the circuit board is letting you have enough time to blow your whistle accordingly, you know, with enough time to get to the actual crossing, and then from there you have to sustain it. Now the way you sustain it is by having your midpoint or your short-term sensors. So I have a sensor inside this this station, and it's actually the light's coming out of that corner window right there to the left of the gentleman standing there, and it's shooting the light across the tracks and across the street to this storefront right there. Hopefully you can see it. There's the other sensor, the black sensor is in there. So it's barely visible when you're standing here live in person. So that sensor basically allows you to hold or maintain the gates in the downward position as long as the train is interrupting them. The minute you leave that short-term sensor, the gates will come up. Not like the initial one where there's a clock attached to it. So these are, you know, short term. And then what's going to happen is you need to double the situation on this end. But if your train is moving in that direction that I was describing before, you're setting off this trigger, or that sensor rather, and then you're setting off the second short-term sensor, which is located here. Now the way I did it here is that I put it inside this tank. I just drilled a little hole, and as you can see, there's a LED in there that's shooting the light off. And then I put the other one all the way inside of this little shed on this side. Now, I don't want to get it in there because it's going to interrupt it, but it's just peeking out. And if I take the roof off, maybe I'll show you at the end, you'll see that it's in there nice and neat. And the reason why I put it so far is because I need to make sure that if there's a train switching for this industry, it still needs the gates to go down. So the box cars or whatever is going in there, or the tank cars, will interrupt that beam, and it'll set off the gates. So any one of these 4 tracks will access the gates if they're, you know, being used. And then finally, once it leaves this, let's say, I don't know, I run cabooses, but at the end of the caboose, once the caboose leaves this sensor, which is the second short-term sensor, it'll immediately tell the board that the train is done, that it has just crossed. So then immediately the gates will start coming up. So it makes it look nice and realistic because it doesn't stay down for like another 30 seconds, which is not, I don't know, it's not realistic to me anyway. It was doing that before when I only had 3 sensors because the board could not understand the logic. So it needs to trigger that second short-term sensor for it to understand that the train has gone by. And that's another thing that amazes me about this board, that it actually understands direction. It understands which way the train is moving in. So as you can see on the left-hand corner here, I'm showing the panel so that you can see that there's zones. You can see there's 1 through 6, and then there's an A. The A is just for, there's a red light that goes off when the gates start, which is just for active, A for active, just telling you that the gates are actually running. But the 1 through 6 is detecting the sensors. Now, when you're using 4 sensors, you're actually using zone 1, 3, 4, and 6. So you're not using 2 and 5, But like I said before, I can add them if I want to. And at that point, I would add them after the road. I would add them here, and obviously on the other side of the road and the opposite side. And then here's a cool thing. Once the caboose passes, the gates come up, you know, I have to have a sensor on this side because this is another entrance point if I'm coming in the opposite direction. So here they are, right here. So this is, again, a long-term sensor. This is zone 6. The other one was 1 on the other side. This is 6. But here's the thing. Even if I'm tripping this as the train comes through, you know, the cars are interrupting this light beam, it'll say that it's being interrupted, but it will not allow the gates to go down, which is amazing because it knows that the train's just trying to clear. So once I clear, if I leave about 5 seconds of it not being interrupted, it'll reset itself. So then if I have a train waiting here to go in this direction, it'll start the process over again. So it'll be 30 seconds, horn blow, horn blow, horn blow, cross the gates. It'll still be within the 30 seconds, but then I'm setting off this sensor. So now the board is saying, okay, there's something interrupting the track. We're going to keep the gates down. It'll continue. I could even stop here for a station, you know, stop if I want to, and it'll continue to keep the gates down. And then as soon as my caboose exits that, the gates will pop up. And again, once I trigger these with the locomotive, since it's going in this direction, it won't matter. It'll register it on the board, but it'll keep the gates up. So again, it's just amazing how this understands it. Now, the only thing is that if you're running a train in one direction, another one in the other direction, simultaneously, I don't know how that would affect it. I'm assuming something will eventually go wrong and the gates will come up when the train is still crossing. But I have to look into that. Maybe there's a solution if I get the 6 sensors to adjust that. You know, there's only so much this board can do, you know, without some kind of human interaction. So that's that. So I'm just going to basically run manually the cars through here so you can see what I'm talking about. And you can see it in the picture up here on the left side. I do have the board running, you know, under there. This is the board. And I'm actually recording it with my iPad right now. So you can see how everything is running in sync as I do this. So I'm going to interrupt. It's going to set off the gates. Hopefully they'll come down all the way. There you go. And the other ones are coming down as well. But I got 30 seconds to hit the other one. So I'm going to move this train. Obviously this would have been moving already. And then I'm going to trigger this sensor. So as you can see, on the panel, it's triggering zone 3 now. That's this one here. And then as I follow through, notice the gates have not come up. It's still interrupting. Now I'm triggering zone 4 and zone 3. See how they're both being blocked? So that's going to allow these gates to stay down as long as I want. I could be here for hours. Now the sound module that's connected to this just goes on a loop. So once it reaches the end, I mean, you hear the little stutter. There's a little stutter at the end where it resets, but it's just gonna, right there. It's just gonna keep ringing the bell. So then what's gonna happen is that as I exit this sensor, it should release the gates. Let's see if that's the case. So I just exited that. It should, there you go. See, as soon as it released, it lifts the gates. And then what's gonna happen is on the other side, let me just push this through a little bit. So as I come out of the tunnel here, I will be interrupting this sensor, but it'll just show it on the board, but see how the gates are not coming down? They're still up because it knows that it's trying to exit. So I'm going to just continue to move, move this train out of this section. And obviously this would be a lot smoother. But once I clear this sensor, it turns it off on the panel. And then once it resets, then I could reverse this whole process. So now, once I interrupt this, it should set off this, the gates. Yep, it sure did. And I have 30 seconds to move the train through, blow my horn, and so on and so forth. Just push it through the tunnel. And let me just get to the sensor before it comes up. Now I'm interrupting the sensor, so it's going to keep the gates down. And I come through. I'm interrupting this sensor now, so it stays down. And then as I clear both of those sensors, the gates should stop. And then they're coming up. And obviously I'm interrupting that last sensor, which is the first zone, but it's not allowing the gates to go down. So I'm going to clear this. And now you'll see that it clears on the panel. Obviously, I can go again in the other direction and it'll do the same thing. But the cool thing is, and this I found out just by mistake, that if for some reason you hit a spot where it's like, you're going real slow with your train, you hit a spot where the light can get through, but then you trigger it again, it still will recognize it as the train's trying to pass. So it's not going to like all of a sudden shoot it, turn it on again. So it gives you a little bit of a window for error in case there is like a flat car or something where light can get above it or something, because that has happened to me before. But now that it's wired correctly, it's not happening anymore because it's done the right way. So that's basically how all of this has come together. I'm super happy, like I said, with all of it. The only thing I'll say is that these are very, very finicky. Meaning, not finicky, that's not the right word. They're delicate. So as you're installing them and trying to glue them and trying to install the wire, you have to be very careful, because I almost broke one of them trying to trying to install it. They are made out of pewter, so it's like a soft, very soft metal. You can bend it very easily, so you have to be careful. And the mechanism is just pewter. It's like little pins made of the same pewter that allow these gates to pivot. The wires that came with the gates, I thought were too big, so I replaced them with these thinner wires, and I think it went too thin because they're flexing a little bit, but I just didn't like those thick wires, so I decided to do my own thing. But every other gate is going very smoothly. I think the only reason why this one is a little choppy is because it's up on the hill and it's catching something within the plaster or something in there. So I might just stick a tube in there and run the wire through it. This way there's nothing for it to get caught on. Let me just show you the sensors in here. This is the one sensor that's hiding inside the station. Obviously it'll set it off because I'm interrupting it. And the other one that's in here that I wanted to show you is sitting inside the building right there. I know it's hard to see, but it's right there, and it's peeking through that window right there. So I'm happy with that, with the way that came out. And then, all I have to do now is just finish the scenery, and that'll be another Finish What You Started episode. But for this episode of Finish What You Started, with my crossing gates, I think we've finished everything we needed. So I'm looking forward to the next episode. I'm not sure where it's going to be, but it's whatever project I decide to finish from the other million projects that I've started. So more videos to come. See you then.